Good evening, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to the Cutting Room in beautiful downtown Manhattan. I'm Brad Tolinski. I'm with BackStory, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, Ibanez Guitars and Guitar World. And we're in for a really great evening of conversation. And we're here celebrating a whole bunch of different things, different projects that Steve's working on and we're going to be talking about. And without further ado, I would bring the man out himself, and we're going to start talking.
Good evening. Boy, it's so great to be in New York City. I grew up on Long Island, and yep. You were there, huh? That's right. Oh, of course, yeah. And we used to cut out of school in the 70s and come see kung fu movies and save our quarters for 42nd Street, you know, all that stuff. Back in the day.
I did the same thing in Detroit, but it was the Allen Park Cinema. Not quite as glamorous as 42nd Street.
Right.
Anyways, earlier this year, Steve, you celebrated a milestone sort of by releasing Passion, the 25th anniversary edition of Passion and Warfare.
Yeah.
One of the best guitar records ever.
Thank you.
Yeah. But what was really...
I love hearing Brad say that, though.
But what was really interesting about it was that there was a bonus disc called Modern Primitive. And I think for many of us, we thought, well, this is just sort of this album of maybe it's bonus tracks or sort of outtakes from Passion and Warfare. But really, it's an incredible record. I think one of your finest works. And, I think it got a little overlooked by bringing out Passion and Warfare. And I thought we would talk a little bit about that this evening, as well as many other things. But just to shine a little bit light on this really great record. First, could you tell me a bit on, how that came to be and the decision to make it part of the Passion and Warfare?
Sure, yeah.
package?
Well, I knew from an early age that I wanted to play the guitar. I had no expectations, really, about the future. I always thought that the idea of becoming successful was just completely, it was actually frightening to me because, when you're young and somebody says something, it gets in your head. I was a little boy, and my aunt said, people who become famous go insane. To say, New York City is... I used to think if I went to New York City, I'd see rats racing. I don't know why. But so I actually had no expectations. I was actually afraid of the idea of being famous for some reason. But because of that, it allowed me there was an opening to do the weirdest music I wanted, And I was very into Frank, Zappa.
Yep.
And yeah. Thank you. And I love the recording process. The idea of sound on sound was, it was like when I discovered that was possible, it was like an epiphany. Yeah. And so I was instantly into the knobs and the EQs, because I've engineered and produced all my records.
Yep.
So when I moved to California, all I wanted to do was record. And I just started recording, cutting my chops, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I made my first record, Flexible. And that was very...
Not too bad either, Flexible.
Thank you. And obviously, anybody that's looking to have a career in the music business would never make a record like Flexible. But I enjoyed the process. And then when I released it, I saw how I could improve, and I liked the idea of making records and releasing them. So I just started working on all this music that was, I mean, imagine if you didn't have to please anybody except yourself, and if it didn't matter what you did because you didn't have any expectations. So I just started recording all this music that was very dear to me in a sense, and I put a band together, and that was The Classified. And there was these incredible musicians, Stu Hamm on bass, and Sue Mathis on keyboards, which was somebody I met at Berkeley, and Tommy Mars on keyboards. Total freak, one of the greatest musicians I've ever met in my life. And Chris Frazier on drums. And I just started recording and gigging and recording and gigging. And I never quite finished the material, recording the material. So I put it on the shelf because I joined the band Alcatraz. Mm-hmm. And then, thank you. What an easy crowd. Yeah. David Lee Roth. White Snake. No, okay, so I really liked the process of making the music. So I joined Alcatraz, and while I was with them, I got a solo record deal offer from Capitol Records. So I wanted to start anew, so I put all that stuff on the shelf, and I just started recording what turned out to be Passion and Warfare. And when it came time to release the 25th anniversary, and as you know, I was so fortunate. I mean, the record found it found an audience, and it came out at the right time. I had this incredible momentum of press that you can't even buy. You know, I had the on Flexible, there was the Attitude song, which was in Guitar Player magazine, which was like huge for me. Right. And then the Crossroads movie hit, and that was like, wow.
That's made a recent strong emergence on YouTube. Like every time I go through my thing, the sequence from Crossroads.
Yeah. It's funny because I was watching it the other day, and I was thinking, man, who is that guy? Mean dude. He must be from New York. So, and then I had the Dave Roth thing, and so there was a great momentum of joining Alcatraz when Yngwie was taking his place, you know. So I did Passion and Warfare, and it luckily had 25th anniversary, and I thought, you know, what can I do here that's just different than the normal remastering and adding a few bonus tracks? And fortunately for me, I was working with Sony, Sony Legacy team, and this is an incredible team of record guys that are just really interested in music, you know what I mean, and being very creative. So they liked the idea of me going back and taking all of this music that I started from the Classified and completing it, and then recording songs that I had written for the band that we never really got to record. So that was Modern Primitive, and the odd thing is when I listened to that record, when I was making it, you know, you're looking back into the psyche of your 22-year-old self or something, you know, and I was thinking, wow, how did I do all that? You know, where did I find the time and the patience? You know, you ever listen or read something or look at the things that you did when you were young? It was like you were just constantly in it. You get very forensic about stuff, you know, and I really liked the music. It was very adventurous, quirky, you know, which is probably my greatest strength. And when we decided to release it with the 25th anniversary of Passion and Warfare, it seemed more like a glorified bonus, you know. But as such, it's a real art marketing too, you know, how to market things and to have the best impact and the best penetration, and you know. So it may have gotten kind of lost in the 25th anniversary, and it was originally intended. I know I'm talking a lot here, I mean, but I wanted to get it all out. That's right. It was originally intended. It was another one of my crazy release ideas, was to release a 10 CD box set, and it was called the Secret Jewel Box, and it was to house all of these quirky kind of projects that I have done that haven't necessarily been conventional type releases. And it turned out great. They all sold out. They're these big, beautiful boxes, and it has a slot for 10 CDs. And it came with 4, and the 7th CD was always intended to be Modern Primitive. So I thought, let me work with Sony to get it released separately on its own. So that recently came out July 7th. And the funny thing I've noticed from traveling the world, touring for the 25th anniversary of Passion and Warfare, was the Modern Primitive is most of my fans that have it, they're telling me it's their favorite Vai record, which is so cool because it's my favorite Vai record.
So, but help me understand this now. When I was listening to it, it's not just the recordings from back then. Like you actually went and sort of re-recorded and a lot and added to maybe the original tracks. I don't know. How close are they to the originals?
Well, there was about, I'm kind of like a recording pack rat. I have stuff, probably by the end of this interview, I'll have recorded you on my iPhone somehow. I don't know. I like documenting moments. I must have gotten that from Frank. He did that a lot. And so I recorded a lot, especially back then because I had gotten my first 24-track machine. So things started to sound really good after Flexible. Mm-hmm. So with the Classified, we'd probably cut about 12 or 15 tracks. And they were just burning a hole on the shelf for 30 years.
Yeah.
Because some of them, I knew that for me at least, as the artist, you got to enjoy what you're doing, and you have a vision for something, and when it's not completed, it's kind of like it's always bugging you, It's every time you walk past the shelf, it's going, I'm over here, come on, finish. So I went back and I listened, and I took about probably 6 or 7 of those tracks that I had recorded, which was bass drums, some guitar, some keyboard stuff, and I finished them. But there was a handful of tracks that we used to play with the Classified that I had not tracked, and so I actually got that band together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like the whole Pink and Blows Over suite, that's all the original band. And so, yeah, there's maybe 1 or 2 tracks that are only like 20 years old, that were written quite a while ago, but the others were written even before that.
So were the players better or worse?
Well, one of them had quit music. Stu Hamm always improves. Yeah. Chris Frazier has been a professional touring. He's in Foreigner, And Tommy Mars is just, there's no words to describe that guy.
Yeah. Tommy Mars, he's from outer space.
No. Tommy Mars, you just nailed it. That's it. He is.
Yeah.
So half of it was recorded about 30 years ago and then completed. So all the guitar solos and stuff are contemporary Steve.
I guess one of the, as an advocate for the record, because I did feel like it was overlooked and I really, really enjoyed it, was that it's not a bunch of, like I said, creaky tracks from, that just sort of got tossed out there. This is, state-of-the-art recordings. So go out and get it.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, when you're creating, when you write, mm-hmm. You're a great writer, and when when something is your potential. When something is flowing that's at the peak of your creative potential.
Yeah.
There's no way of knowing what the rest of the world will think, and it's really foolish to even try to figure that out, because you never can. But when I was doing this record, every song made me so excited. I'm embarrassed to speak sometimes about how much I love my own music. And some of it I don't. All the stuff that I never felt, I didn't feel that, yeah, there it is. Oh, yeah, there it is. Whenever I did something with an agenda or for an ulterior motive or for money, it was never, to make a hit, it's not really my juice to do. it never really, I never really went back and listened to it, but that record and those songs, I couldn't stop listening to that record for a while. I still do listen to it.
Yeah. So let's just go back a little bit to that time too, because it's interesting. I mean, you were playing very progressive music with the Classified, and this was sort of at the height, or the beginnings, I should say, in Los Angeles of the whole hair metal phenomenon.
Yeah.
And who was coming out? I know you guys were playing clubs. Like, what was that time like? Who was coming out to listen to you guys? I mean, did you feel like you were out of sorts with what was going on in Los Angeles at that moment?
Oh, we weren't anything like those hair metal bands, obviously. And there was a lot of that stuff that I liked. It's interesting because my wife, incredible taste in music, and she worked when we were young, because we've been together since college. She worked on the Strip there, and she would see all these bands come in. And she would see, I saw this band, and I think their name was Rat, and I think they're going to turn into something. Or, I saw this band, and it's a Poison, or, all these. So that was sort of the kind of thing that was emerging, but it was a lot I liked about that music, but it didn't have everything that I was looking for.
Yeah.
And you see, the thing is, I had no expectations. I didn't feel like I had to compete or I had to be successful. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just did. I just did. And the people that would come to the shows would be, because, then there's a little bit of a rumor that starts, so this guy's a pretty good guitar player. So those kind of people came. I'm a Zappa fan, so Zappa fans started coming because I had the history with Frank. And some people actually were interested in Flexible.
Yeah.
So that, that happened.
Well, you were doing in the middle of creating all this progressive music, and then all of a sudden you sort of shifted gears a little bit and played in Alcatraz, and then later on with David Lee Roth. Did that feel like a compromise for you, in terms of what you were doing musically? Like.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because when I was a teenager in the 80s, 70s, sorry about that, in the 80s, I was really into those bands, the progressive bands. Led Zeppelin was #1 for me, and Deep Purple, Queen, and Jethro Tull, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, all these kinds of things, Hendrix, of course. So I always thrived on the energy that rock music delivered because it's unlike anything else. I prefer playing rock music. The energy of it, the performance potential, and me, ham is cooking when I'm on the stage. I just like the performance element of it, the energy. So when the opportunities for these bands came up, I knew that it would give me an opportunity to kind of like let off that kind of steam. And it was great, And Alcatraz, of course, was a choice because Frank, I just started in my career independently, and Yngwie Malmsteen was in Alcatraz, and he had just left, and they were looking for somebody, and I thought, well, let me give it a shot. I don't play anything like him. Probably it's not going to work. But the guys were so great, and they were so interested in my style of writing music, the kind of music I was writing, it worked really good. Mm-hmm. And then when Dave Roth had left Van Halen, I loved that band, Eddie, of course, and that was...
I call him the Charlie Parker of metal. He
started
exactly. it,
Yeah, good call. So when that opportunity came, it was probably the most coveted position for a guitar player in the world at the time. And the odd thing, I don't know why, but when I heard that Dave Roth was looking for a guitar player, I said, that's me. I got the gig. I don't, it's one of those things. It's like no matter what I did, even if I didn't want it, it was my gig. I don't know why. And sure enough, the next day the phone rings. It's Dave Roth, and I just loved that band. We had such a great time. It's a different. I'm very good at being a team player if my contribution is appropriate. Right. And with Dave Roth, I knew just by listening to Van Halen, that it had that energy, and I could contribute in a way that I think would work. And it never crossed my mind to try to compete with Edward, because you can't. You know, only a fool would do something like that. But I knew that there was something about Dave Roth that was a little quirky, and I felt that in me too. And as a result, we hit it off really well, you know. So that was great fun, you know. It was
there's a sort of a sense of humor that's inherent in your music, and Dave is a very, you know, most metal guys are always so, you know.
Yeah.
And there's always like that edge of fun, right?
Yeah, there was. I mean, he took being unserious very seriously. And then Whitesnake was another one of those. I loved the band. I thought David Coverdale had the greatest voice in rock and roll. And, you know, all of these things I always knew it was just like a little slice of life. Do it, enjoy it. It's not going to be your career.
Right.
You know, I always knew that when you listen to Modern Primitive, or any of my solo, none of my solo work would work on any of those records. Any of them. Whitesnake, Dave Roth, Alcatraz, you know, any of that stuff. So it was in there. And when I finally left Dave's band, the pull was so great that I didn't feel like I had a choice.
We're sort of getting back to Passion and Warfare territory. So the one thing that struck me about Passion and Warfare, what I thought was interesting, is in looking at your early part of your career, is it feels like sort of your attempt to bring both sides of these parts of your musical personality together. I mean, there are parts of Passion and Warfare that totally rock out, and you know, the animal stuff that sort of get at this more primeval kind of thing, and then there are these more cerebral moments on the record too. I mean, were you consciously trying to pull these things together?
The thing that I was conscious about was my desire for great diversity on the record. You know what I mean? Because there's so many sides that I like about writing music and playing music. I mean, even if you listen to something like Flexible, if you hear something like the Attitude song, which was based on the press that I've read about it, it was innovative, okay? And one would think I should make a whole record of music like that, you know? I probably could have had a career. But I couldn't, because things like Little Green Men or Lovers Are Crazy, or There's Something Dead in Here, which is a song that's got like 25 guitars, all dissonant. I wrote it on an airplane, you know? And that, too, is as important to me, those songs, as something like the guitar prototechnics in the Attitude song. So my records have been very diverse. So when something like Passion and Warfare came along, yeah, there's that side of me that's got that, like the animal that loves that, you know, that energy. But then there's something like Love Secrets, which is complete stream of consciousness composition in the moment. And totally different, but still carrying some kind of seed of from, you know, the guy that is creating it. So I love the diversity.
On Passion and Warfare, the one song to me that strikes me as being, you know, it's not talked about quite as much, but I felt was an important statement, was The Riddle.
Oh, thanks.
I was interested to see if you could sort of tell me on how that fairly complex piece of music came together.
Yeah. Well, what I like to do when I compose, is my favorite thing to do in the world, really, is to create a blank space. Kind of like just be still and create this opening, and then just let my imagination just go crazy. It's a great thing to try. Any creative idea you want to do, the thing that stops most people is, okay, but how? How am I going to do it? And that usually will cut right at the root of your ability to be intensely creative. So I created this opening, and the whole song, it's hard to explain. It's like it's already there. It was like low-hanging fruit, you know. The inspiration for it hit me. Create a drum. It's like Bolero, you know, or something like that. Ravel's Bolero, where there's this ostinato going on.
Jeff Beck's Bolero, you mean?
Yeah, okay, yes. Jeff Beck's Bolero. Beck's Bolero. And the funny thing, I started out, you're going to laugh, okay, I was a big Michael Jackson fan too, you know? And I really like that song, You Gotta Be Starting Something. It's just such a cool groove, you know? And this was way back in, what, 1980, 82? So I started to kind of program a drum beat that sounded like that a bit. And then I slowed it way down. And that's basically the groove in the riddle. Michael Jackson, I lifted it basically from Michael Jackson. But that you'd never know, because you'd never hear him do anything else that's even remotely similar to that. So I had this, and then the idea to just create this moving kind of harmonic atmosphere with all these different intensities. It was already done like that, and then I had to do it. But thank you. A lot of my fans actually enjoy that song. You're very intuitive too, and you know, just to tell you a little bit, some of you that don't know Brad, he's one of the most respected writers, music writers, and musicologists, really. And honestly, I've known Brad. I've known Brad for many years, and it was as the editor of Guitar World. You know, you end up talking to him a lot, and you talk to a lot of different journalists all around the world, and it's really nice when you talk to somebody that understands your music, understands your career, knows your potential, kind of knows when you hit the mark and knows when you miss it based on your potential. And it's rare, and his ability to do that with a vast amount of musicians is really quite extraordinary. So I'm really glad to be talking to you here.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll give you one example. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to change the subject.
No, I'll just give you one example. Okay. Yeah. So you know, like when you get a creative idea for something, you can get really into it, and you create this momentum of enthusiasm, right? And it turns into passion, and then you just get like, oh my God, I got to do this. So there's this one song on a Modern Primitive. It's called Never Forever. And I always start out, okay, what am I going to do that I've never done? Every song has to have something in it that I've never done and that I feel is unique for me, at least, right? So what am I going to do for this guitar solo? Okay, what am I going to do, right? So I just started fooling around, and I created this moving bed of vocals. It was a boys' choir. And I'm using the pitch wheel, so it's going. This is like, to anybody it doesn't matter, but to me it's like, you know, yeah, this is great. And then I'm thinking, what can I do for a guitar solo that's completely bizarre and interesting and has something, something? So then it hit me. And the idea was to play the melody of the song, but grab the moving boys' choir that's being bent all over the place, and then go back to the melody, and then get sucked into the. So it sounds bizarre in a weird way, but I think only I'm going to get this. You know, I'm probably going to be the only one that's ever going to really feel like this is different and interesting and weird. And the first interview I did for the record was with Brad, and the first question he asked me was, "What did you do on Never Forever? How did you do that?" So that's what I mean.
I thought it was going to be some sort of cheat where he just had like the, you know, MIDI strings follow his guitar line or something. And then Steve told me, "Nah, I recorded that, and I figured out where all the microtonal bends were, and I did it with the." And I'm like, that's just nuts. But anyways, it's
unlike
it's a
me
great
to take the hard route.
You know, sort of speaking in those terms, you know, your relationship with Frank Zappa is always like something that people are interested in. And I was sort of wondering, you know, everybody sort of knows how Frank helped give you a start in his band, sort of set your career going. and helped push you to become the player that you are.
Yeah.
What role did he play in your life after? Did you ever say, gee, what do you think about me going to do a more rock thing, or did you like my solo? I mean, did you ever talk with Frank?
Well, I never had the courage to ask him if he liked Passion and Warfare. Well, you know, the funny thing about Frank, one of his geniuses is the ability to see the potential of a musician even better than they do, in some kind of odd thing that they can do that's, you know, that's sort of extreme. So in me, he saw somebody that had the ability to transcribe all that stuff I was doing and to play these very complex melodies. So he pulls that, and then he uses whatever your unique talent is in his music. Brilliant, brilliant. But after, when Passion and Warfare came out, I didn't, you know, like I say, I would never say, hey, how do you like my record, you know? But I saw an interview, and at the end it had his top 10 favorite records. Passion and Warfare was number 1.
Oh, wow. I mean, Frank's was a little misunderstood, I think, in the sense that everybody just thought he was about the complexity of the music. But at the same time, he never hesitated to say how much he liked somebody like Ed Van Halen, like a musician that just had something special about them.
Yeah, yeah. He liked Yngwie a lot, you know, and Alan Holdsworth.
Right.
And he wasn't at a loss for words when he wanted to express what he didn't like, too.
Speaking of Yngwie, you've been doing this great tour with
Generation X.
Generation X, Yngwie Malmsteen, Zakk Wylde, Nuno Bettencourt,
Tosin
Abasi, the incredible Tosin Abasi.
Yeah.
So, as a close personal friend of Yngwie, what's he really like?
Well, we've been close friends for like 30 years, you know, and you have to understand Yngwie. To really know him is to love him, because he's so funny, and he's so Yngwie, and he's so smart, you know, and he's obviously, you know, but. With a situation like that, with all these guys, you know, what I discover working with pretty big, very confident people, you just need to let them be who they are, you know, and you can't take anything personally, you know, and I don't, so it works out great, you know. And that's all they really want. They just want to be respected for what they do and appreciated, and then it becomes a double thing. And Yngwie's fast. He's very private. That's the thing. He's very, very private. He never goes out, and you won't see him. Then it's cool, you know. But he's very intelligent. He's funny, and you just have to know how to translate sometimes what people are saying, you know. They may be very dynamic and saying something outrageous, and you know, what they're saying is actually something very simple.
Yeah. Yngwie's yelled at me a couple of times, so it's okay.
Sorry?
Yngwie's yelled at me a couple of times, so it's. But I mean, obviously as a gifted guitar player, going out with these guys, do you ever look at them and say, holy shit? I mean,
every night.
I look at Yngwie's, that technique that he has of not really playing sweep arpeggios, of just doing this crazy hummingbird thing that he does, and still marvel at that.
Each one of those guys has such a powerfully unique talent in a particular, like Nuno, just the way Nuno is able to pick, every note sounds like a machine gun fire, you know? And Zakk is an animal, man. He's just an animal. And he's so big, you know, and he plays so big. And I just like, I just love this guy. I love all of them, you know. that part of them that we bonded in that level.
Does any of that rub off on you? Do you ever, when you go and record or something like,
there's elements of it.
I want to do that.
Yeah, man. There's elements for sure. I mean, with Zach, I can tell you each thing that I've been inspired by each one of these guys because you're with them every night on stage. You're this close. I mean, I'm watching Yngwie. My favorite parts of the night was doing a Black Star with Yngwie. Wow. Because when you're jamming with somebody, the most important thing is that they know how to listen, and they're not just playing over you and you're talking to a brick wall, so to speak. And this song that I did with Yngwie had so much space in it, and we traded very intimately. And after a few shows, I think he doesn't have as much experience as it is I may have had because I'm always playing with a lot of other people. But his ears are gigantic, and he can listen. And we had such amazing, and I'd be this close to watching him play, and I'm still like, what the hell is he doing, It's like economy of motion or something. So that was inspirational to me. Not that I would even try to play what he plays. I'm in a different wheelhouse completely. Mm-hmm. But that economy of motion, it looks like he's knitting. But it's like, oh my God, he's such an inspiration. There's a new player. Because I get people send me links to all these absolute incredible shredders all the time, and it's fascinating. But there's no dimension in the harmonic structure, in the melodicness. But Tosin, I can't even figure out rhythmically what he's doing there.
He's one of the last guitar players that I heard that I thought, there's something new going on here.
There is something, and I've grilled him about it, and he's one of those guys. It's like, I don't know, I just do this. I think it's all in 4/4, he says, but it's like, dude, no, wait a minute, what are you doing? What's going on there? Yeah. And I mentioned Nuno. So with Tosin, just his ability to sweep is phenomenal. Yeah. It's freakish, and his timing, his sense of time, and his concept of time. That was very inspirational. And Nuno he's just such a great showman too. Yeah. Just his ability to talk to an audience and his playing that, I don't know how some people could have their guitar so low and every note sounds so clear. Yeah. And
I always think of him as, and I know he's into his sports big time, but I always think of him as like a professional athlete. Like the way he the way he approaches everything and he plays. It's almost like there's a show going on there.
Yeah.
Sport.
Well, you know what I did at the end of the American tour? Before we played the last song, through the tour we would have this thing where we'd come up with one-word description of each other, just for fun, to have a laugh. But on the last show, I gave my one-word description of each one of the guys, and Zach, the word was outstanding, because I would just sit backstage sometimes and watch him walk around, because it's just so, there's just this, and it's like all heart too, by the way, And Nuno, passion. There is nobody that I know that can be that. I mean, he'll sell you sand if you live in the desert, He gets so into something, and he's so intuitive. His passion is just intense, and Tosin, the word was unique because what he's doing was unique. And Yngwie was confidence. Because he really is fiercely confident. And not just like, in an egotistical way, but he knows what he wants, and he's very professional, too. I mean, he's there on time every time. But when he makes a request, you better be ready, So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, first, have you ever, though, put on Zach's guitar with the chain strap?
I wanted to maybe someday have children again, so I didn't.
I saw Tom Morello said, I got to put that on, thinking, and literally saw his knees buckle.
Oh, yeah. Every year, Zach's chain gets bigger. For his birthday, I sent him this chain that was like this big. Yeah.
So, speaking of Tosin, and actually a whole generation of guitar players, one of the things that I don't think gets sort of recognized enough is your contribution to the instrument itself, the creation of the Gem guitar, which is that 25th anniversary this year as well? The creation 30th year. Sorry. Anyways, it was a total game changer, and many of the electric guitars that we play today and people that are making guitars owe a debt of gratitude to Steve's vision on the Gem. Could you tell me a little bit of how you created it?
Yeah.
And I think also the point I was getting at is Tosin plays an 8-string guitar, right? 9-string guitar.
I think it's, no, 8.
8.
Sorry.
So, anyways, you also introduced Gem, also the extra string, which has become such an important part of many young players today.
Yeah. Well, it was very innocent because when I was young, I loved Strats because they had a whammy bar. Yeah. And I knew I had to have a whammy bar. As soon as I saw what a whammy bar does when I was a kid, I said, okay, there I am. That's it. But I didn't like the way they sounded. They weren't rock and roll to me. They weren't Led Zeppelin, or Black Sabbath or something like that. So I loved Les Pauls. I liked the way they sounded, but I couldn't sit with them. I couldn't play them very well. And so working with Frank would get an idea for something, and he would just do it. He didn't make any excuses, and he wasn't afraid to do all sorts of things to a guitar. So I was so young, I was 18 when I started working for him, and then 20 when I joined the band and started touring. So it was impressionable. So I learned if you want to do something, you just do it, So I was thinking I'd like to build a guitar, and I wasn't quite sure what. So there were certain things that I liked and certain things that I disliked about both Stratocasters and Les Pauls, and really there wasn't any other guitar in the market that I was crazy about. Like Telecasters were that was like an ice pick in the forehead or something for me to play those things. They were so un-rock and roll to me at the time. Little did I know a lot of the Led Zeppelin stuff was recorded on a telly, right? So I just started thinking, what would I like to see in a guitar? And I went to this little guitar shop in Hollywood. And at the time now, I was joining Dave Roth's band, and I had this beat-up green, I called it the Green Meanie, but it was a Charvel. And it was right when those, what do they call them, the mixture between like a Strat and a Les Paul. There's a terminology for it, but it's basically a Strat style body with a whammy bar with a humbucker pickup. And that was Edward.
Yes.
Yeah. So he really introduced that, and I said, well, that's smart. You don't have to have that single coil pickup when you're trying to rock out. And so I said, well, I know I want that. But there was a lot of other things I wanted, and I went to this little guitar builder, and the first thing I did was I drew the body. I thought that Strats looked really nice, but they weren't that sexy, really, because they kind of had rounded edges and stuff. They were a little utilitarian. So I wanted something a little more kind of angular and sexy, because I think this is very sexy. And I thought, I can't understand why these people are making guitars and they're giving you these frets, but you can't reach them. Duh, And I wanted 24 frets. I think maybe Grover Jackson in a Strat, Super Strat. That's what they call them, yeah. So I wanted 24 frets, and I wanted to be able to, this neck is scalloped, but on the conventional Gem, only the last 4 frets are scalloped because you can really grab the note, As Yngwie would say, you can really grab the note by the balls, man. So I thought that was a good idea to scallop them up top, and it was totally cut away, because I thought, I'm just doing this for me, who's going to want this? And totally easy there. Now, the one of the elements that was really absorbed into conventional contemporary guitars was the 3 pickup configuration, the way that it's wired.
Right.
Because at the time, I didn't know it was new. It was just something I wanted, but all the research and everything tells us that, yeah, there was no production guitars. But these are humbuckers, and they have more of a fatter, warmer sound than single coils. These are double coils. But one of the great things about a Stratocaster that I loved is they all have single coils, and when you put 2 single coils on at once, like this one and that one, it's a completely different tone. It's like a tubey, kind of warm.
The Hendrixy
kind of thing.
Little Wing sound.
Yes.
Yes.
And you can't get that with these conventional humbuckers at the time. So I came up with this idea to split the coil. So when I'm in this position, I get the full-on humbucker, which I loved. And in this middle position here, it turns these 2 pickups on, but it splits the coil, so it's 2 single coils. So you have 2 single coil pickups, so you can get that sort of Stratty sound. And that was unique at the time. And then the middle is just this, and then same thing here. You split that coil, and then you got your balls to the wall here. And that was unique at the time. I only needed one tone control, so I got rid of the other. And I moved it down a little bit, the volume, because on Strats, most guitars, the knobs seem to get in the way. But the one thing, and then there was a couple of simple things like the input jack. No guitar that I knew of at the time had a practical input jack, because they had them like where you plug them in like this, straight in, like Les Pauls, and you step on the cable and it falls out. Like, duh. So, and Strats had it, however they had it, it was just really easy to step on it and have it come out. So I just put it here, and never a problem, unless, of course, you're swinging around your head. So then, but the real thing was the whammy bar. I love the whammy bar, and the Floyd Rose was popular at the time, and it was new, and that was a godsend. Well, it was hell until they put the fine tuners on it. But none that I had played would go sharp. See how, I mean, that's high. I can fret. I'm fretting those out, No guitar did that. They would, if you set up a Strat a particular way or a Bigsby, you get a little bit of that, but you don't get the stratosphere. So I was looking at them saying, what's stopping it from doing that? And it was really just the wood on the body of the guitar. So I took a hammer and a screwdrum and I recorded the Attitude song. And that was, from what I understand, that's the first floating trem. And then I had like 4 or 5 of these made. And they were just like this.
You forgot the most important part.
I'm getting to it.
Okay.
So this was perfect for me. And I had like 4 or 5 of them. And there's a couple still in existence. I only own one now. And then I joined Dave's band, and obviously all the guitar manufacturers were interested in having me use their guitars. But I'm like, well, thank you, I got this one. And, well, we'll make it for you. Like, that could be convenient, right? So I sent it to virtually every manufacturer. And inevitably, I got back their guitar with my name on it. And had nothing to do with what I gave them. So I'm like, no, this is the guitar. But then Ibanez took it. And in 3 weeks, they brought me back the most perfect guitar exactly to my specs. I was just stunned. And I thought, this is great. And then they said, we would like to make this a signature guitar and to release it to the public. And I thought, well, who, it's kind of quirky. I thought, okay, we'll see how it goes. But I thought, there's also elements to this guitar that are very practical and might be borrowed, which is fine. That's how we all stand on the shoulders of everybody that came before us, even in manufacturing. So I thought, what can I do that's completely quirky, bizarre, that no one would really copy because it's just too obvious. I put a handle in it. Yeah. And originally I did it, my friend Joe DeSpagni, who was my best friend from Long Island, he's a guitar builder too. And he did it for me in my earlier guitars. But I thought that it would be just great to be able to pose with it, you know. And of course, one of my favorite things is give the one little evil eye through the hole in the guitar. So that's how it came about. And I have to tell you that I was stunned at the success of this. To this day, frankly, and confidentially, don't tell anybody, 30 years, and of course you get a royalty because I designed it. I got my biggest royalty check in 30 years last quarter. Wow. This guitar. That's how the guitar is so consistent. And then they wanted to do, because it's so quirky, they wanted to, Ibanez was interested in making a guitar that was much more reasonably priced, so they asked me if they could make the RG guitar. Well, they already had an RG, but then they wanted to make this guitar without the handle, and that's basically the RG. And that has gone on to be the second, usually third, but the second biggest selling guitar, you know, year after year. And then a few years after they gave me this, I came up with the idea to put the 7th string on it, and God knows what happened there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, most of these ideas, they make sense when you start talking about them. Yeah. You're sort of like, yeah, you know, you should do that. But anyways.
It's the trying too hard that never works.
Yeah.
And it was just so innocent.
Yeah.
I was like, well, what do I want this? Okay, this, all right.
And how do you feel when you see these other guitar players play this instrument that you created?
That must they're not better than me. No, I'm kidding.
That must be super gratifying.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's like
really,
inventing
really
a new color.
Yeah, right.
Like Nurple.
Nurple.
Or something.
That's the color
like that.
of your nipple when
Green.
the water's too cold.
We worked that out downstairs.
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there have a question or two that you've always wanted to ask Steve. So we have Laura over here is going to bring around a microphone, and let's have at it.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, buddy.
My name is Hector. I always wanted to ask you about your orchestral music and your process in writing it.
I'm sorry, can we turn him up just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to ask about the orchestral music that you wrote a few years ago, and the process in composing it.
Yeah.
And I saw a video that you put on your channel while you were composing it, and you had the bits and the iPhone and this and that. I wanted to ask you also about, well, I also wanted to ask you, do you have perfect pitch? Is that something that if you do, that you developed, or was it innate? Or overall also, the process?
A lot of people think I'm much more I'm much more brilliant than I really am. I'll tell you that first. And I'm not self-deprecating myself, because there's people that have these extraordinary expectations of what my musicality is, and perfect pitch is one of them. But no, I don't have perfect pitch. But I know a lot about it, and I've tried to get it, but you can't. Perfect pitch is something that is in a particular, the potential for it is in about 30 to 50% of people, and they've actually narrowed it down to a particular gene. But it could be developed intensely if it's there in early years, childhood, infancy. There's this, Rick Beato is, if you're familiar with him, check him out and his son Dylan. His son Dylan, have you seen Dylan Beato?
No, I haven't.
He's a 6-year-old, I think he's 9 now. His degree of perfect pitch is so intense, I didn't think that it was humanly possible. He can hear double polychords, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4 chords in a row, and tell you every note and write them down. I can't do that. But I have good relative pitch, which means if I hear one note, and I do have, if I think about it, B flat, A flat. Yeah, there it's A flat. Okay, so, so. And I only know that because of I played Electric Ladyland so many times. Have you ever been? So it was A. So, but once I know one note, I pretty much know them all. So that's a very good tool to have if you're a composer. It's not necessary, but it's really handy, because then you can just write music. And before I actually played the guitar, I always wanted to be a composer. So I started studying music long before I started playing the guitar. And I learned a lot about music theory. I learned almost everything when I was in high school, because I had this incredible music theory teacher. And one of the assignments every day was to compose a piece of music, actually compose it, not just chords and melody. And then he'd say, okay, now break this out for 4 French horns. So I wrote my first orchestra score when I was in high school, for the high school. It was an abysmal disaster, but it was a good practice. So I've really enjoyed composing through the years. It wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that I really started to have a lot of orchestras interested in playing my orchestra music, because it's a hard nut to crack, you know, that whole community, especially if you're a rock guitar player. But now it's fantastic. I've been doing orchestra projects. I just played at Disney Hall not too long ago, and I played with many orchestras around the world. And
is that online? Is there any place to hear that?
No.
Oh.
Because to record it would have cost me my firstborn. Disney Hall. But interestingly enough, after the concert, they wanted to record it for free, to bring me back and do it, because they enjoyed the music so much.
Do it.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Hey, Steve.
Hi.
Hi, Brad. What's up? So I want to take a moment. Fire Garden was it's such an underrated album, I think. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And the Fire Garden suite particularly is absolutely brilliant. Can you just talk maybe a little about the inspiration for that album, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, sure. I had done Passion and Warfare, and because I came from a rock band background, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to front the band, so I actually never toured on Passion and Warfare. So then I decided to find a singer and do more of a rock, peculiar kind of a rock record, and I found Devin Townsend, who was one of my favorite musicians, actually. And we've worked a lot through the years. I just did a gig with him in Norway at this really great convention. So I got a taste of the rock band, and it wasn't quite. I enjoyed it, and I liked that record a lot. Some people ask me why I hate that record, and I'm like, well, I like it. And so after I finished that tour, I was jogging. I went out for a run, and this is where a lot of ideas come. And the entire Fire Garden record came to my head. It's pretty much like what it was going to be. Not all the songs or all the notes or stuff like that, but you just get a picture. But then, as I was running down the hill, I know how long it takes and how intense it is to do a record like that for someone like myself, because I do everything myself. So I thought, maybe I should do something right away that's more simple. And that's when the idea for Alien Love Secrets came. And that's just a stripped-down trio kind of a record. And I know it's the kind of music that most of my fans probably wish I did more often. But the thing about Fire Garden was, you can hear there's a lot of vocal tracks on that record, because I wanted to split it, and because I'm so extreme, I used every minute that a CD could hold. And I wanted to sing. So I sang the songs myself, and that's when I realized I like singing, but I don't want to sing too much, So within the conceptualization of my records, usually the thing that I focus most on is diversity. I love diversity. So Fire Garden has a tremendous amount of diversity. And when the Fire Garden suite came into my head, it's like when people ask me, and I'm sure this holds true for many
kind of, you know, artists. How do you do this or how do you do that? The best answer is I don't know. Because you just get an inspiration for something and you just start doing it, and next thing you know, it's growing and it's telling you what to do based on your unique creative instincts. See, that's the thing. You have to find your own uniquely creative instincts as opposed to pantomiming somebody else's, which there's nothing wrong with that to a degree. I mean, we're all inspired by other artists, but to really surrender to your own creative instincts is a lot more difficult than you think, because sometimes there's a lot of fear in it. There's always the fear. First of all, there's usually the fantasy of success. This is going to be big. Everybody's going to love it. Finally, people will know how great I am. You know, these are the things that go on. What am I going to do with all this money that I'm going to make? You know? And so all these fantasy thoughts can, for some people, and all of these things take away from the intense focus you need to find your deep creativity, unique creativity. And then what happens a lot is there's fear. Fear is probably one of the greatest deterrents. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is fear of being different, fear of failure, fear of being criticized, and not fitting in, you know? So that usually derails people from their own uniquely creative ideas. Because you might get an idea that doesn't have anything to do with conventionality, but then the little fear in the head says, well, I better not do that, you know, or how am I going to do that? It's just impossible to do that. So I had all those voices, and they're still there to a degree, but the intense enthusiasm for a good idea just eclipses that a little bit. It eclipses the fear. Well, used to, in the old days, it was a little, but now I don't care. There's no way I'm going to waste 1 minute doing something that I don't think I should be doing. Right?
Yeah. Amen. So I just want to wrap this up by asking you, what's next?
Oh, boy.
What's going on?
Okay, what is next? What am I working on right now? Well, potentially, on the last Generation Axe tour we did of Asia, I recorded all the shows. So I may try to put something together there, live Generation Axe CD, which would be really cool because we did some great shows. I'm working on something I've been wanting to do for a long time with Legacy, Sony. And it's basically my next solo record. But this time it's going to be more along the lines, I've got it all, it's all done. It's painful when it's done and it's not done. The idea is to strip it down more like Alien Love Secrets. So it's all trio stuff, but it's not going to sound that way because I'm thinking of bringing into it all of these elements of looping and things like that, but on a whole different level. What I want to do, an analogy would be black and white TV compared to holograms, you know.
Well, it sounds pretty kick-ass.
Wish me luck. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Steve for spending all this time with us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Been a great journey, Steve. Steve's going to say hey, you know, after. So hang on. We're going to just chill out for a few minutes. And thank you all for coming to the Cutting Room, New York. And thanks to our sponsors, Guitar World, Ibanez.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Steve.